December 1941. The ocean south of the Philippines is still, black, and relentless. A moonless night smothers the horizon. The only light comes from the faint glow of instruments inside a steel capsule 200 feet down. The men of a US submarine cling to silence. Oil sheen on the water above betrays the scars of earlier escapes. Every creak of hull plates sounds like thunder in their skulls. The Pacific War is barely a week old. On the surface, the Japanese Navy moves like a tidal prophecy. Sleek destroyers, proud cruisers, and the armored giants of the battle line. Their decks gleam with ceremony and certainty. In Tokyo they speak of destiny, of empire stretching from the Indies to Hawaii. No one in their circle believes a few steel tubes crawling beneath the waves can threaten the floating avatars of the emperor's will. But listen, in this darkness something ancient hums. Inside the cramped sub, red emergency bulbs paint faces in ghostlight. The air is hot, heavy with the bite of diesel and sweat. The sonar operator's palms tremble over his headphones. He whispers, "Props, bearing 045. A heartbeat passes. Multiple. Large." Above them, the sea rumbles. Battleship screws beating a pattern known around the fleet. A sound both beautiful and cruel. The convoy is too big to challenge. Orders say observe, report, survive. The captain chews it over in silence, gauging depth, distance, death. He doesn't speak, but every man aboard knows what he's thinking. If we fire, we die. If we flee, we live like ghosts. They drift lower, the pressure climbing, hull bolts singing under strain. The ocean feels endless, almost biblical. Machines hiss, gauges twitch, hearts slam against ribs. For a moment, the captain imagines the enemy ships above. Shadows the size of cathedrals, sailors walking deck planks 5 stories over his head, convinced nothing below them could ever strike back. That arrogance has ruled the seas for generations. Since Trafalgar, since Tsushima, victory at sea meant the bigger gun, the thicker armor, the grander salute. Japan inherited that faith, worship of the gun turret, the perfect broadside, the duel fought eye to eye. To them, the submarine is a rumor, an unchivalrous invention, a coward's weapon. The narrator's tone lowers, almost mournful. Empires often fall not from lack of strength, but from the inability to see what doesn't fit their vision. The sonar pings again, a harsh metallic pulse reverberating through salt water, seeking metal in the dark. The crew freeze. Above, a Japanese destroyer begins its own search. Explosions of light dance faintly through the water column. Depth charges, rolling from rails like steel raindrops. Then comes the waiting. 7 seconds. 12. A distant boom, muffled by hundreds of feet of water. The hull flexes. Paint flakes drift like snow. Another charge. Louder. Closer. The sub tilts. Lights flicker. Men bite down on whatever prayer they remember. Finally, silence again. The water settles. The hunters move on. The submarine endures. Only now does the captain exhale. He studies the surface through the periscope. Just rippling moonlight. The convoy fading into distance. He lowers the lens. "They never knew we were here," he whispers. Pride and dread share the same breath. Outside, bubbles trace the sub's slow descent into blackness, vanishing like a prophecy still unspoken. "This is how the undersea war begins," the narrator intones. Not with glory, not with fanfare, but with invisible machines and invisible men, learning in silence how to fight an empire obsessed with spectacle. The camera drifts upward through the dark toward the shimmering wakes of the Japanese fleet. The thunder of their engines melts into the slow beat of a human heart. It's the sound of certainty. An empire convinced it commands the ocean, blind to the predators forming beneath its hulls. They sail toward glory, unaware that their greatest weakness isn't the enemy above the horizon, but the one rising unseen from the deep. The destroyer's screws fade into distance. The sea returns to stillness. And out of that black quiet, we rewind, back to the source of the faith that made such blindness possible. Tokyo, late 1930s. Rain glazes the slate roofs of the Navy Ministry, dripping down carved stone lions at the doorway. Inside, cigarette smoke curls through corridors lined with portraits of admirals past. The air smells of ink, tobacco, and unquestioned confidence. Shoes clap on polished floors as officers in immaculate white debate the size of turrets and the length of guns with the intensity of theologians disputing angels. This is not just a navy, it is a creed. To command a battleship here is to inherit centuries of ritual. the Emperor's ocean incarnate. Their sea god is armor-plated, turbine-driven, crowned with a rising sun. Every rivet hammered into Japan's steel fleet carries the echo of ceremony and sacred duty. And above all these floating altars stands a promise. Japan will never again kneel to a Western fleet. From the industrial heart of Kure to the fog-choked bays of Nagasaki, entire cities transform into temples of construction. Night fires from shipyards mirror volcanic eruption, sparks rising like prayers. Workers labor inside skeletons of giants. Beneath tarpaulin screens, a secret shape begins to form, one that dwarfs every ship before it. Her name will be Yamato. Displacement, 70,000 tons. Main guns, 460 millimeters, the largest ever mounted on a warship. Shell weight, over 3,000 pounds apiece. Each barrel could hurl an explosive farther than the eye could follow. When engineers present the blueprints to the Admiralty, silence falls. Pride, relief, fear. They feel all three and choose the first. No projectile at sea can pierce what we shall build, declares one Vice Admiral. Heads nod across the room. The myth of invulnerability is drafted into technical specification. Yet beneath the confidence lies an older weakness, the devotion to face-to-face battle. They have learned every lesson from Tsushima, except humility. Reports from Europe warn of disruption. German U-boats stalking convoys, Britain nearly strangled by unseen enemies. But the whispers fade in the cigar haze of Tokyo's war rooms. Our warriors meet their foes where the sun can witness them, a senior officer insists. To kill from shadows is beneath honor. Doctrine over data, ceremony over adaptation. And so, while other nations sink merchantmen in the dark, Japan builds theaters of daylight war. Massive decks, pagoda towers, brass-polished corridors. Inside the dry dock, welders chant to keep rhythm as the hull of Yamato grows. The pounding echoes across the harbor day and night. Heartbeat of a nation determined to forge invincibility from steel. The narration slows, almost reverent. When she finally rolls down her ways and kisses the water, witnesses say the harbor itself trembled. The crowd along the docks cheers through tears. They see not machinery, but redemption for every humiliation, since Commodore Perry's black ships forced open their shores. Sea trials come. The massive guns elevate, fire, and the recoil seems to push the horizon itself. Spray soars higher than rooftops. The ship's wake gleams silver under the noonday sun, a moving mountain crowned with imperial banners. She is magnificent. Too magnificent. The price of wonder is blindness, because on that same day, in London's fog and in America's test ranges, quieter revolutions unfold. Sonar arrays hum for the first time. Torpedoes learn to home on sound. Radar pulses touch the sky like invisible hands. The world is bending toward the unseen. Only here, amid pageant and salute, the admirals still worship spectacle. The narrator lowers his voice. No one notices the irony, how the more perfect the giant, the more fragile the dream that built it. Pride has a frequency all its own. It hums just above the noise of reality, just out of hearing, until something smaller, faster, quieter tunes in. The scene closes at sea. The Yamato turns toward open water, her hull knifing sunlight into glitter. On the horizon, a ripple of reflection catches a lookout's eye. A slender tube of glass and steel breaking the surface for a breath. He blinks, and it's gone. Beneath that same horizon, a different kind of fleet is already gathering. Silent, crude, relentless. The ghost that will one day hunt the sons of Yamato. Dawn over Pearl Harbor. Thin smoke still rises from the water. Oil slicks slide across the surface like broken rainbows. Beneath them, the shapes of dead battleships rest in shallow graves, their hulls torn wide open, masts jutting upward like gravestones. December 8th, 1941. America wakes to the sound of 1,000 hammers. Not applause, preparation. Inside the surviving docks, something unexpected is stirring. A different breed of vessel, small and cramped, more eel than Leviathan. While the aircraft carriers will roam the skies and the battleships sleep in their wounds, these steel predators are ordered below. Their mission, strike the Empire where it cannot see, and starve it to death in silence. They call themselves the Silent Service. In the oily haze of the base workshops, voices echo. Load that Mark 14, check the gyro settings again. Young officers unroll tide charts across mess tables still smeared with last night's coffee. Every man smells of salt and exhaustion. They are briefed with brutal simplicity. We won't sink Japan's pride. We'll sink her lifelines. From the start, the war beneath the Pacific feels cursed. The first torpedoes streak out and fail. Some veer off course, some bounce against hulls like rubber mallets. Others vanish without a trace. It takes months before Washington will admit the truth. The Mark 14, America's main torpedo, is flawed. Too deep, too dull, too proud of itself. Sound familiar? But the submariners fight on, improvising fixes with hacksaw and prayer. Patrols vanish, 29 boats in the first year alone. Crews reduced to names carved into plaques, their motto skewed by bitter irony. Run silent, run deep, and hope someone remembers. Narration slows, shifts to the intimate. Inside one such boat, the USS Wahoo, Lieutenant Commander Dudley "Mush" Morton prowls the control room. He is loud, brash, and adored. He calls his torpedomen killers, and his attacks shooting parties. He breaks rules with the precision of a saint breaking bread. Alongside him, a calculating mind, Lieutenant Richard O'Kane. Together, they form the first wolf pack of the Pacific, though they hunt alone. The Wahoo's interior is a world of noise and smell. The steady whine of electric motors, metal sweating with condensation, socks steamed dry above torpedo tubes. Men sleep beside warheads, dream inside carbon monoxide haze, subsisting on canned spaghetti and nerves. Days blur. Anxiety becomes background music. Then, contact, periscope depth, bearing 075, target, a tanker, Japanese flag. Morton leans into the scope, cigarette clenched between teeth. Water beads down the lens. He exhales slowly. Flood tubes 1 through 6. The boat holds its breath. A keening whine of compression. Then, fire 1. The torpedo streaks into the dark. Seconds stretch like hours. Missed. Another. A sharp clang inside the tube. Dud. Third. Silence. Then an eruption that shakes the sea itself. The Wahoo rises to periscope height. Flames bloom across the horizon like a sunrise made of oil. Morton grins. A savage, exhausted grin meant only for his crew. For a moment, the tension breaks. Laughter in the control room, sweat wiped away. Pride earned the hard way. But below triumph runs a deeper current. Fear. Because every patrol is dice with fate, and the dice are loaded, each sub must carry its victory back across thousands of miles of enemy ocean, without errors, without air, without mercy from the sea. By 1943, submarines like Wahoo and Tang, now under O'Kane's independent command, rewrite the unspoken laws of warfare. 10% of the Pacific Fleet's personnel are submariners, yet they will sink 60% of Japan's merchant tonnage. Outnumbered, unseen, and uncelebrated, but effective beyond anyone's imagination. Their attacks come like thunder from nowhere. A lazy convoy morning turns into a nightmare of flashes and fire columns. In Tokyo, reports arrive of ships erased by phantoms. Admirals demand explanations. None satisfy. How do you fight what you cannot find? The narrator breathes out the next line. Slow and ominous. Because in the dark logic of war, every predator eventually teaches its prey how to hide. The Wahoo surfaces one twilight evening amid a sea of burning wrecks. The ocean orange with flame, the wind thick with gasoline fumes. Crewmen cheer. For a heartbeat, victory tastes real. Then a radio operator pushes his headset back, a frown creasing sweat. Intercepts, odd-coded patterns from Tokyo signal change. Convoys rerouting, escorts doubling. Anti-sub tactics evolving overnight. Morton lowers his binoculars. The sunset stains his face red, like warning flare after victory. The hunters have made their mark, and in doing so, have awakened something vast, disciplined, and vengeful beneath the rising sun. The fires of the Wahoo's victory still smoulder on the open sea, but farther west, in waters that gleam like polished steel beneath the morning sun, the empire begins to flinch. It is now mid-1943. The Pacific is vast, but Japan's empire, so recently triumphant, has become a prisoner of its own geography. From the oil fields of Borneo to the arsenals of Yokosuka, every drop of fuel, every grain of rice must voyage 1,000 miles through an ocean gone haunted. The convoys begin. Lines of merchantmen crawl through the waves at 8 knots, flanked by destroyers that used to hunt glory, but now chase shadows. Their decks drip salt and fear. The sea is no longer comforting blue. It has turned paranoid grey. The radio static sounds like whispering ghosts. In bunk rooms painted the colour of rust, young signalmen dream of torpedo wakes. Lookouts hallucinate periscopes in the whitecaps. Every glint on the water means death. And when the horizon falls too quiet, commanders mutter a single truth learned too late. The silence is always worse. The Japanese High Command responds as empires do when invisible enemies prevail, with organisation, decrees, and denial. Meetings in Tokyo run long and furious. Admirals unroll maps across tables lacquered to mirror finish. Red ink marks losses that grow daily. Tankers, freighters, transports. Form convoys, one insists. Double escorts, says another. A third protests. We don't have the fuel to escort anything. The arguments spin, circular as a gyroscope. Pride drowns reason. Still, the combined escort fleet is born, a desperate fleet within a fleet. Dozens of ships filled with bravery but starved of training. They are sent to sweep the lanes between Formosa and Manila, the China Sea and Kyushu, but beneath them, the Americans are listening. From their bases in Fremantle, Australia and Pearl Harbor, US submarines spread outward. No longer lone wolves, but coordinated packs. Their sonar operators hear the future coming. A shifting oceanic music. Ping echo, ping, silence. And then an explosion that blots out dawn. The rhythm of war itself changes. Once it was the roar of 9-gun salvos and the scream of dive bombers. Now it is the deep metallic heartbeat of sonar, the hollow percussion of depth charges rolling from a destroyer's stern. Imagine the scene. A Japanese convoy crosses the East China Sea under a typhoon sky. Clouds tear themselves apart in the wind. The lead destroyer zigzags, 10 degrees port, 10 degrees starboard, its commander cursing at the compass. Deckhands clutch the rails as waves slam 40 feet high. Then, amid thunder and spray, a flash below the surface. White plume. Vertical roar. A freighter lifts clear of the sea and crumples into itself, spilling flaming oil that dances across the peaks of waves. Confusion erupts. The escorts charge in, dropping depth charges by instinct, not aim. One explodes too close, shaking its own hull. Men stumble, bleed from ears, shout into the wind. Where is it? Where? But the American submarine has already slipped away, unseen in the churned depths, counting 40 seconds to safety. No cheers inside this kill, only the hiss of ballast tanks and the smell of burned insulation. War in the deep is deafening silence. The camera pans wide, dozens of sunken hulls tilted toward heaven. By 1944, Japan loses half its merchant fleet. Oil becomes priceless. Training flights are cancelled. Some destroyers are moored permanently because fuel exists only for combat sorties. And yet the admirals still issue orders from their capital of ceremony. They pray to efficiency with broken instruments. They speak of honor to men dying of exhaustion. Memoirs from Japanese survivors decades later describe the same nightmares. The hum of engines that never arrive. The vision of an unseen periscope just beyond reach. One writes, "We called them sharks of steel. We envied their invisibility. The war that Japan once ruled through pomp and pageantry is being rewritten by ghosts. Every convoy that leaves port carries more fear than cargo. On a moonless night, a transport captain guiding the remains of yet another convoy spots the dim outline of Kyushu's mountains on the horizon. Home at last, almost safe. He allows himself one deep breath, one human moment. Then light, sound, ruin. The ocean beneath him detonates in pure orange fury. The ship lifts, breaks, implodes. The Empire's heartland flashes like a lighthouse of death. For centuries, Japan believed its home waters sacred and untouchable. Now, even the seas around Kyushu whisper the name of an enemy they cannot see. The sea burns, not in one place, but everywhere. Night after night, horizon after horizon, black plumes climb into the Pacific skies. Tankers, freighters, ore carriers, they do not sink with ceremony anymore. They simply vanish under the roar of an underwater bloom, leaving oil and ash and floating shoes behind. It is late 1943, and Japan's empire is bleeding from the arteries. The submarine war, once a nuisance, has become a siege. Trade routes that fed the engines of conquest now flow with nothing but wreckage. The Gulf of Siam, the Sulu Sea, the South China Sea, all are gauntlets no ship can run unscathed. Merchant captains whisper of cursed waters, of steel phantoms that appear without sound, strike, then melt back into the dark. The world map of Japan's reach still looks vast, but it is a ghost map now. Behind it hides a truth too large to print in newspapers. The empire is starving. Inside Tokyo's naval command, the walls creak with the weight of denial. Admirals argue beneath portraits of their ancestors, promising that one final battle, a decisive clash of surface fleets, will turn despair into destiny. They speak of honor, of Yamato spirit. They do not speak of mathematics, because the arithmetic of the Pacific is unforgiving. By the end of 1943, more than 2/3 of Japan's oil convoys from the Dutch East Indies have been hunted down and obliterated. Every ship sunk is not just metal lost, its futures erased. Planes will not fly, tanks will not move. The Yamato herself, pride of an empire, must spend her days anchored in port, a colossus unable to walk. The narration slows. The focus tightens. Out on the convoys, the casualties are not imperial symbols. They are men. Merchant sailors, farmers turned crewmen, boys who once studied poetry. They burn nameless in seas slick with oil, their voices swallowed before rescue ever comes. Survivors float amid crates of rice and sugar, faces blackened, eyes glazed. Even the sea seems weary of feeding on them. In logbooks recovered later, submariners record their own silence after such kills. We surfaced. Oil covered everything. The stench stayed on our skin for days. War has transformed from glory to mechanics. And in those mechanics, the Americans have found mastery. The silent service has evolved. The early years of failure of dud torpedoes and guesswork have given way to precision. Mark 18 electric torpedoes strike without leaving a wake. Sonar plotting becomes symphonic. Mathematics translated into death at bearing and range. Captains coordinate by radio now, weaving invisible nets across shipping routes. Every launch follows a ritual. Check, lock, fire, wait. 30 seconds of eternity. When the explosions come, they are not celebrations. They are conclusions, calculated, inevitable. The submariners do not cheer anymore. They update tonnage, turn, dive again. Machines of focus, devouring an empire one merchant at a time. Strategically, it is stunning. By early 1944, the United States has fewer than 200 submarines in the Pacific, but they will destroy over half of all Japanese shipping ever built. 1% of the Navy delivering nearly 60% of Japan's total wartime losses. The camera sweeps across endless oil slicks stretching like mourning cloth across the sea. The smell of diesel, the flicker of fire in the waves, the hum of distant aircraft searching for survivors that no longer float. The narrator's voice softens, elegiac. There are no victors out here, only degrees of survival. The submarines glide through a landscape of their own making, hunting yet haunted by what they've done. Even the Pacific seems to reflect their faces back at them. Hard, unblinking, tired, and yet above all this ruin, the Japanese Admiralty clings to prophecy. They whisper a new name, a new idol of salvation, Musashi, sister to the Yamato. Thicker armor, heavier guns, more myths welded into her hull. She is to spearhead the rebirth of the Imperial Navy. 18 inches of armor around her citadel, 32 anti-aircraft guns bristling like a hedgehog against the sky. Her designers call her a sea fortress. Tokyo's wireless press bursts with cautious optimism. Unsinkable, someone says again. But out in Fremantle and Pearl, when American submariners hear the rumor, their response is quiet, almost amused. They've learned that no fortress, no matter how sacred, can float forever on arrogance. And as the Musashi's keel cuts through the dawn of 1944, somewhere beneath her path, the hunters of the deep are already listening, waiting to prove her divinity false. Dawn, October 23rd, 1944. The Sibuyan Sea, mirror flat, steaming in the first heat of morning. Far to the north, the Japanese fleet sails for its final gamble, steel stretching for miles. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, carriers without planes. The sea itself groans beneath their weight. This, the Empire's last act of defiance, the greatest concentration of capital ships ever assembled by Japan, on a course straight into legend. From the darkened bridge of the USS Data, Lieutenant Commander David McClintock studies the glow of radar echoes. They shouldn't exist. So many contacts, moving fast, moving together. He wipes condensation from the green screen. What he's seeing feels impossible. A wall of titans where only scattered convoys were expected. Moments later, A coded message crackles back to Pearl Harbor. Enemy force sighted. 30 enemy ships, heavy units, bearing northwest. The Battle of Leyte Gulf has just awakened. Above, clouds descend in rolling sheets. Below, the Data and her companion USS Dace stalk the giants through radar ghosting and rain squalls. On those ships, men can smell nerves in the electric air, the mixture of sweat, battery acid, and fear. Orders ripple through the compartments. Battle stations, ready all tubes. Through the periscope, the horizon turns alive with silhouettes. Yamato's pagoda tower piercing the mist. Musashi's twin gun barrels like tunnels to oblivion. They steam in 2 columns under the command of Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita. Each battleship weighs more than an entire American destroyer squadron. Every broadside could tear the sea open. But Kurita's battle force is being watched. At 0655 hours, Data rises to periscope depth and spies an escort zigzagging ahead. McClintock murmurs the numbers: range, bearing, solution. A smooth metallic click answers each syllable as torpedo tubes flood. Fire 1, fire 2, fire 3. The hull shudders slightly. Then silence. 37 seconds later, the ocean erupts. The flagship Otago, Kurita's pride, is hit midships by a wall of fire and water. In the command deck above, Kurita is thrown from his chair as the cruiser begins to list. Within minutes she is broken, her superstructure aflame, ammunition cooking off like monstrous applause. The Admiral escapes into the burning sea, clutching debris among men who once saluted him. Dace joins in, sending more torpedoes slicing into Takao, another heavy cruiser. When the smoke clears, only fragments remain. Dozens of sailors drift among fuel slicks and floating barrels that shimmer like dark stained glass. For them, honor and horror share the same temperature. Inside the Data, chaos is clinical. Crewmen cheer under their breath, but no one smiles for long. They know retaliation will come from every destroyer in range. The submarine dives deep, deeper still, until hull plates groan like old bones. Depth charges rain down, muffled to distant thunder. 1 week ago, Data was invisible. Now she's infamous. The narrator pauses. The shift from urgency to inevitability, measured in breath. Kurita survives, plucked from the water by another destroyer, but his fleet is fractured, communications splintered. The Japanese command believes they can still win by shock, by sheer will. They chart new orders. Continue the push toward Leyte. The American invasion there, General MacArthur's great return, must be stopped, even at suicidal cost. The Musashi leads. She moves like a fortress adrift, her 18.1-inch guns sleeping, her crew chanting prayers. On her deck, sailors line the rails as American scout planes, silver dots against burning clouds, begin to swarm. The first bombs fall at 1,000 hours, then more. By noon, the sky itself seems stitched with black puffs of flak and arcs of tracer. 12 bombs, 19 torpedoes, then 30. She still sails. By afternoon, her engines falter but refuse to die. The Musashi becomes myth in real time. Every hit absorbed like a beast too ancient to end. At last, near sunset, she slows, lists, and the sea begins to reclaim what arrogance had built. 50,000 tons of steel rolls onto her side. Men trapped below pound the bulkheads in darkness. The ship groans once more, a deep metallic toll that echoes across the Sibuyan Sea. Then she's gone, sucked stern first into an oil-black grave, her bubbles rising like ghosts. Historically, the strike is devastating. Tactically, it's the moment Japan's naval soul begins to drown. The empire built its pride upon battleships. Now its pride lies broken at the floor of the Pacific. Kurita, soaked and grief-stripped, is rescued again. He watches the sunset from another ship's deck as oil drips from his uniform sleeves. In that silence, decision turns to defiance. He will not withdraw. He orders what remains of his fleet onward, into the jaws of annihilation. Because what else is left for the sons of Yamato but a last stand? The narration slows, gravity returning like tide. For centuries, Japan's warriors believed death in service to empire was sanctification. Now that belief has been distilled to its cruelest form. Vengeance as doctrine, sacrifice as currency. The next mission Kurita plans will pay that cost in full. And so, out of the smoke of Leyte Gulf, the ocean births something new. An armada of men who know they will never come home, sailing under the banner of a single word, kamikaze. The sea is quiet again. but it's the kind of quiet that follows ruin. In Tokyo, winter 1944, the smoke from bombed harbors drifts like unanswered prayers. Inside the Imperial Navy's headquarters, maps still stretch across the walls, dotted with pins that no longer mean anything. What once marked dominion now marks disaster. Oil, gone. Steel, rationed. Ships, rotting at their moorings. And through the floorboards of the Admiralty, the sound of typewriters ghosts through the night. Casualty lists, loss reports, requisitions no one will ever fill. The phrase murmured in those halls is simple. Merciless, we cannot fuel the fleet. Desperation breeds invention, but not the kind the engineers once dreamed of. The empire that once built unmatched giants now turns to weapons of sacrifice. Enter the kaiten. The word means turn of heaven. On paper, they are manned torpedoes, 24 feet long, fitted with a small periscope and primitive controls. In practice, they are coffins with propellers. The pilot climbs inside, seals the hatch, and steers himself and his explosive warhead into an enemy hull. He carries no parachute, no escape system, just a final letter rolled tight in wax paper. In training bays near Hiroshima, young volunteers arrive by the dozens. Most are barely 20. They bow, smiling for the camera, as mechanics bolt the hatches shut for the first and last time. The tone in these films is falsely triumphant. Flashing banners call it the ultimate expression of spirit. But listen between the frames, and you can almost hear something else. Fear disguised as faith. The Americans call them human torpedoes. Their submariners, now so adept at industrialized war, watch intelligence reports with unease. To fight machines is tactical. To fight men who have declared themselves already dead is something else entirely. The narrator slows, a low hum of reflection. 3 years earlier, Japan mocked submarine warfare as cowardice. Now it places its final hope inside the same hull shape. The circle has closed. Where once the Empire preached the glory of the surface gun duel, now it worships destruction from beneath. The film's camera now turns inward, into the war rooms of ruin. Admirals sit beneath flickering lights, listening to rain tap on the roof. Their faces, once polished in parade glass, are pale and hollow. Charts pinned behind them show consumption curves plunging to zero. The engineers argue fuel percentages that don't exist. No voice dares say the word defeat, but it leaks through the silence anyway. A few cling to myth, rebuild the fleet, lure the enemy in, reclaim divine favor. Others bury their faces in hands and whisper prayers for sons already gone. Outside, in shipyards half submerged by bombing, crude kaiten lay side by side like metallic eggs. Crews baptize them in sake before shipment. For the emperor, the ritual leader says, the irony blazes bright. They no longer have fuel to run their fleet, yet they still have enough for martyrs. Across the Pacific, the Americans move differently now. Methodical, detached, mechanical. Computers predict intercepts, sonar patterns guide strikes, radio relays synchronize attacks hundreds of miles apart. The war that began with screaming pride is ending with arithmetic. Efficiency replaces valor. For every human sacrifice Japan launches, the US answers with a machine born to endure. This is where the moral tide turns. For those few Japanese officers honest enough to see it, the shame is unbearable. Not that they are losing, but that their very idea of honor has become its own executioner. The submarines they once scorned as dishonorable now enforce the Empire's starvation. Endurance, not ceremony, has become the last true virtue. The narration tightens. The dusk over the inland sea burns the color of rust. Somewhere in that still dying light, the Admiralty sends its last message of hope. April 1945, Operation Tengo Yamato, once the invincible goddess of the fleet, will sail again. But this time not to conquer. She will go south with barely enough fuel for a one-way voyage, carrying 1,400 men and a nation's pride aboard her decks. Her orders: beach herself at Okinawa and fight until she is consumed. On her plotted course, American submarines drift in the gloom, their hydrophones already picking up the heartbeat of turbines. The sea knows what's coming. It can smell destiny in the oil. And as the mighty Yamato turns toward Okinawa, every man aboard her already understands what his admirals will only whisper later: that this journey is not a mission, it's a funeral. April 6, 1945. The Seto Inland Sea glows gold beneath a sunrise too calm for the purpose it will bear. On its silver surface, something extraordinary moves. A titan that once ruled the Pacific, now an artifact marching toward oblivion, Yamato, the pride of an empire, the last breath of a dying fleet. Her decks are immaculate, her paint repolished, her guns reloaded as if ceremony could hide the truth. She carries only enough fuel for one-way travel. 1,400 men aboard know it. They've been told to pack rations for a single day, to prepare for immortality wrapped in fire. Operation Tengo, the Empire's last naval offensive. The mission brief reads like a suicide note. Sail south to Okinawa. Beach the ship. Fight until destruction. At dawn, petals from nearby cherry trees drift across the dockyards, swirling through the exhaust haze like a benediction. The turbines open their throats. 46,000 tons of moving iron begins to tremble. The shoreline workers stand silently as Yamato leaves port for the final time. The narration slows, reverent. There are no drums, no cheering bands, no illusion of triumph. Only the monotonous heartbeat of engines and a soft wind carrying ash from cities already burning. Below decks, engineers remove medals and family photos from around their necks, placing them in cloth bundles to leave behind. Above, sailors line the rails, bowing toward the Imperial Palace lost beyond the horizon, each man an offering. Through binoculars on distant patrol, American submariners watch from the shadows. The USS Hackleback picks up the first vibrations, a deep murmur rolling through the depths. Sound contact. Bearing 265. A column of battleships, cruisers and destroyers, the largest warship still afloat among them. Radio transmitters click awake. Morse pulses leap across the sea. Within hours, every carrier group in range knows Yamato is moving. The pursuit begins beneath the waves, shadow to shadow. US submarines stay low, feeding coordinates but holding fire. Orders are to preserve the target for air attack. Still, they take what they can. One Japanese escort ruptures under a torpedo spread, flames curling skyward like a warning. The rest of the task force presses south, undeterred. On the bridge of Yamato, Vice Admiral Seiichi Itō stares across a horizon too beautiful to trust. His log entry for the morning is brief, almost tranquil. If the Emperor wills it, we shall become waves. By noon on April 7th, the Americans find them. Hundreds of carrier-borne aircraft, Helldivers, Avengers, Corsairs, fill the sky, black dots spreading against cloud and sunlight. Their engine roar merges into something seismic, like the voice of fate rolling over the sea. The Japanese gunners prepare. Every barrel that can point skyward does. They have been waiting for this since the first raid that burned Tokyo. The first wave dives. Bombs shriek down. The sound pressed between steel and air like thunder trapped in a bottle. Explosion, spray, flame. The Yamato takes her first torpedo hit at 12:41. Then another. Then another. Each impact throws fountains higher than her bridge tower. The deck tilts to port. Her giant guns traverse to balance weight, firing blind at the clouds. In the confusion, men on deck feel the deck plates heating beneath their boots. Oil spills flame along the surface, clinging to every wave in a burning skin. Smoke thickens tonight. From afar, American pilots watch her silhouette stumble through fire, beauty and agony fused into motion. Inside the command tower, an officer reports, "List 20 degrees, fire spreading aft." Ito doesn't answer. He watches the horizon, then the men around him, boys, really, and whispers something no one records. Somewhere below, engine rooms fill with water. Ammunition stores cook off in white flashes. One final torpedo tears open her starboard side. Her turbines stop. The world's largest battleship begins to roll. Kun 47. The sea erupts. The magazine ignites. A single detonation brighter than daylight. Seen from 100 miles away, the explosion paints the cloud base orange. Shockwaves ripple outward, scattering survivors like dust. When the spray settles, only wreckage remains. Girders, boots, a floating chrysanthemum flag burning at the edges. 1,000 men vanish with their ship. 300 survive long enough to be pulled from the oily black silence. Among them, no one cheers. They whisper the same thing to one another, over and over. She was beautiful when she died. As the camera draws back, the smoke column stretches toward the stratosphere, tapering into thin air. The narrator's voice returns, low, steady. The age of battleships dies here, on a spring afternoon in 1945. under the same sunlight that once crowned the sea gods of Japan. Beneath it, submarines remain, the silent heirs of the ocean. The weapon once despised by admirals has now proven all kingdoms of steel vulnerable. Yamato's ruins sink quietly, settling on the seabed like a cathedral collapsed in prayer. The waves close above her, and in that silence, a new kind of warfare has spoken. What rose from those depths was not triumph, but reckoning, because when the sea takes gods, even the victors are forced to ask what was truly won. The sea that swallowed Yamato does not rest. Only a few weeks have passed since her fire faded beneath the waves, yet already the empire she served is dissolving, quietly, invisibly, fatally. By the summer of 1945, Japan's war machine is a body without pulse. Its arteries, oil, food, steel, severed not by bombers or the atomic secret still concealed in New Mexico, but by submarines, moving in silence through home waters once considered untouchable. The blockade is absolute. From Hokkaido down to Okinawa, not a gallon of fuel or grain of rice crosses the sea without risk. The remaining tankers are skeletons on borrowed time. Fishing fleets, once safe in the arms of coastal patrols, now vanish in the night. Each sunrise brings a new black halo on the horizon. Oil burning on salt water, driftwood tangled with bodies, ash falling on villages that cannot afford another funeral. The empire that worshipped its navy is now starved by it. Across the islands, clocks seem to slow. Factories echo with hollow clangs where machines stand still. Trains run a few miles, then stop for lack of coal. Farmers pray for rain that comes too late or too heavy. In the cities, Tokyo, Osaka, Nagasaki, people line up for rice that never arrives. Children stare at the sea not with awe, but with accusation. The same waves that once promised glory now promise nothing but hunger. A narrator's tone deepens, analytical but mournful. By August, Japan's merchant fleet has lost more than 80% of its tonnage. Over 8 million tons of lifeblood gone to the deep, more than 1,000 ships sunk by America's silent service. The numbers are vast, but they contain no cheering. Only statistics that collapse into names, and names that dissolve into silence. One American captain writes in his patrol log, "We are strangling a nation. It feels like murder done by mathematics. For every victory at sea, morality sinks a little further." Inside the submarines, celebration has vanished. The crews no longer keep kill counts or paint silhouettes on their hulls. The ocean itself has become too crowded with ghosts. "We never saw them," recalls one sonar man. Just explosions in the dark, a flash, a shockwave, and then nothing. These are men who began the war hunting for retribution. Now, with every sinking, they feel something colder than triumph, something closer to pity. One officer admits decades later, "We lost our rage before we won the war." The voice narrows, intimate, almost whispered. Under the ocean, the US boats reach farther still. They prowl the Sea of Japan itself, through minefields and narrow straits, indifferent to risk. What began as stealth tactics has become occupation of the abyss. Even the fishermen cannot escape. Nets once filled with mackerel now pull up only empty cans and fragments of propeller. On shore, the Japanese statesmen understand what the admirals will not. The war did not end with fire, it ended with suffocation. The killing power of submarines was not theatrical, it was methodical. No sweeping battles, no victorious parades, just the quiet extinguishing of movement, industry, and finally, hope. A fading radio broadcast captures it perfectly, voice trembling over static. Ships are gone, the nation cannot eat. No bomb could have made surrender inevitable without this famine at sea. Before the mushroom clouds of August cast their light, submarines had already turned Japan's horizon black. The narrator pauses. A slow metallic ping echoes. That sound, the sonar's pulse, was once the rhythm of war. Now in peace it's replaced by static. No targets, no convoys, only silence. For men trained to listen for echoes of life through steel and water, the absence of sound feels unbearable. In mess halls back home, medals are presented to submarine crews in front of proud crowds. But when they gather alone afterward, they sit quiet, glasses half drained. What do you toast after a war fought in darkness? The camera drifts across the Pacific one last time. Wrecks lie like tombstones below. Merchant hulls blooming with coral, their flags long dissolved. The ocean, neutral and vast, keeps its secrets without judgment. The victory is total. But it is not glorious. It comes not in fanfare, but in famine. Not with trumpets, but with emptiness. A final sonar ping fades into silence. The narrator's voice barely above a whisper. Japan's surrender began before the bomb fell. Began here, beneath the waves, where silence itself became a weapon. But when the guns quiet and the ships rust, the question remains. If silence won the war, what sound will peace make? The last sonar ping fades, the sea exhales, slow and endless. After 4 years of annihilation, the Pacific, once torn by fire and fear, falls quiet again. The waves glint as they did before the war, but beneath their calm. The ocean keeps 1,000 secrets. Off Okinawa, sunlight now filters through 50 meters of water, painting the remnants of the Yamato in ghostlight. Rusted gun barrels reach upward like cathedral spires. Coral has claimed the deck, wrapping itself around steel once meant for destruction. Fish glide through shattered compartments, life weaving through the machinery of death. The war is over, but it isn't gone. In 1952, Japanese divers make their first descent to the grave of the Empire's greatest ship. Their lamps cut through drifting sand and clouds of oil still leaking from ruptured tanks. One diver, once a sailor himself, touches the hull, whispers a prayer, and watches bubbles slip toward the surface as if carrying the dead home. Above water, Japan rebuilds from cinders. Tokyo's skyline rises again, steel replacing ash, neon lights flickering over narrow canals once filled with wreckage. The same engineers who once designed giants of war now bend their craft to peace. Merchant vessels, fishing boats, tankers for trade. Yet in every new keel laid a memory lingers. Each rivet carries a whisper of lessons learned too late. Narration steadies, cool and reflective. In naval academies around the world, the textbooks change. The submarine, once scorned as the coward's weapon, has rewritten the law of the sea. Invincibility is dead, the age of the colossal battleship, gone in a handful of years. Strategy shifts from spectacle to silence, from visible might to unseen reach. Ironically, the first to grasp this truth are the very men who most denied it. Japan's surviving admirals, their uniforms replaced by post-war suits, travel abroad to study under their former enemies. They learn sonar theory, diesel-electric design, and the new mathematics of underwater warfare. They build not to conquer but to understand. Humility, it seems, makes an excellent teacher. But history never sits entirely still. In the decades that follow, submarine patrols circle the globe without headlines. Polaris missiles replace torpedoes. Nuclear power erases the need to surface. Invisible reins tighten around nations that may never even see their hunters. The ghosts of the Pacific whisper warnings. Your technology may evolve, but your nature has not changed. The camera drifts deeper again, through the wreck of the Musashi, the bones of cruisers, the ribs of transports. Seaweed waves like prayer flags, each wreck a chapter of forgotten names. More than 400,000 Japanese sailors remain entombed in the ocean floor, the largest graveyard in human history, unmarked except by coordinates. At memorials in Kure, Okinawa, and Pearl Harbor, survivors now meet as old men. They shake hands, eyes wet with exhaustion rather than anger. Between them stretches a silence too vast for apology, yet full of understanding. They have seen the same horizon, watched the same friends vanish beyond it. Time has done what governments could not. It has humbled them both. A brief pause. The water glows blue, eternal. Each generation inherits the stillness differently. For some, it is triumph, proof that courage and precision overcame tyranny. For others, it is grief, evidence that faith and pride can bury empires deeper than bombs ever could. For most, it is both. And maybe that's the point. The ocean is not vengeful. It remembers without choice. It holds its dead impartially. Japanese, American, civilian, sailor. The sea beneath the Pacific has learned what humanity has not. Victory without empathy is only another form of loss. The narration slows to a near whisper. Today, if you dive deep enough south of Kyushu, you'll find the skeletons of ships turned to reefs. Coral glows where armor once shone. The ocean floor hums faintly with the echo of propellers that will never turn again. The surface above is blinding, beautiful, full of life. Children play on beaches that once faced invasion fleets. Their laughter carries over waves that still conceal the outlines of ruin. That is how the war ends. Not with noise, but with water filling every trace of it. Because history does not vanish, it submerges, waiting for the next generation brave enough to dive and listen. Beneath the waves, the war never truly ended. It simply grew quiet enough for memory to float to the surface.